So I think for the first time in history, the lyrics of a rap battle have been taken to court by the loser of the rap battle. Yes, Drake has officially filed a defamation lawsuit against Universal Music Group. He is alleging a host of things around Not Like Us. This is the lawsuit that everyone is talking about, and I want to go through some of the highlights, so I guess lowlights of the lawsuit, depending on how you look at it, and try to glean what is Drake trying to get from all of this. So he began the year by first withdrawing some of those previous legal filings that happened last year. I talked about this in earlier videos, but just to catch everyone up to speed, in case you've been living under a rock, and good on you for that, Drake is really mad about the success of Not Like Us. He feels that his label, Universal Music Group, which just so happens to be Kendrick's label as well, artificially promoted the song, pushed it through things like bots and payola, and he's just stark raving mad. He's going after Universal Music Group, Spotify, iHeartRadio, basically the biggest companies in the music industry, alleging that he was being treated unfairly. Now, at the time, these were just legal filings. These weren't actual lawsuits. So first, Drake rescinds those filings. And of course, all of his fans are so happy on social media. The optics are that he must have gotten some sort of a payout. He settled. He's the big winner. But just hours later, he actually filed an official lawsuit in federal court, this time in the state of New York. Here's Billboard's reporting. Drake sues UMG, Universal Music Group, for defamation over Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us. In a full-fledged lawsuit against his longtime label, the star rapper claims UMG prioritized, quote, corporate greed and subjected him to violent attacks. That's an interesting point, the violent attacks. We're going to get into that when I actually go through the lawsuit. But let's read a little bit more. Billboard reports, Drake has filed a lawsuit against Universal Music Group over allegations that the music giant defamed him by promoting Kendrick Lamar's diss track Not Like Us, claiming the rapper boosted a false and malicious narrative. Here are some of the things that Drake's lawyers are alleging. UMG intentionally sought to turn Drake into a pariah, a target for harassment or worse. Really? UMG did not so because it believes any of these false claims to be true, but instead because it would profit from damaging Drake's reputation. Again, really? We're going to get into this, but already your eyebrows should be raised just reading some of these things. Now, one of the biggest accusations is that Not Like Us directly led to Drake's life almost being threatened. So this is what they say. That Not Like Us subjected him to the risk of physical violence, including a drive-by shooting on his Toronto area home just days after the song was released. If you remember, I did a video breaking that down, how there was violence outside of Drake's home. Last that we saw, law enforcement was not able to connect it to Kendrick. I believe Drake's security guard was injured. And at that time, myself and other people came forward and said, this should never escalate to violence. Again, we don't know if one has to do with the other, if there's a causation relationship. They could just be completely unrelated. But regardless, there should be no reason for violence. Many of us are old enough to remember when rap battles did turn into something very violent, people losing their lives, people losing their freedom. It should never be that serious. And I think that was kind of well understood. So it is interesting that Drake's team is saying that Not Like Us directly led to him almost being like physically harmed. Now, this is what's interesting. They're alleging all of these things, but time and again, as Billboard is reporting, the lawyers are not pointing the finger at Kendrick. They are saying that UMG may spin this complaint as a rap beef gone legal, which it is, but this lawsuit is not about a war of words between artists. And I just find that to be just a little bit nonsensical. This stems from a rap beef. And, you know, if Drake really does feel like his life has been threatened, his reputation has been irreparably harmed, wouldn't you go after the person who said those things? Like it's almost like he's going through like the middleman, right? Here, Universal Music Group, instead of going to the source. And I think in his heart of heart, he knows if he goes after Kendrick, tries to claim defamation, I mean, aside from it being like a First Amendment nightmare, whatever shred of integrity or reputation he still has would be completely decimated. Because just imagine like Kendrick Lamar coming to court, wearing a suit, having his glasses on, and reading sort of his lyrics as the poet that he is. I mean, it would be just ridiculous and, unnecessarily and unintentionally funny. So I think even Drake knows that going after Kendrick is just something that he's afraid to do. So instead, he's trying to find some place to put the blame, some sort of punching bag, and in this case, it's his record label. So I think we got to get into the actual legal filing. So this is how it begins. In the middle of the night on May 7, 2024, an armed group of assailants drove up to the Toronto house in which Drake and his family resided. Drake was inside. The car stopped in front of the residence, someone yelled "fuck Drake," and at least one gunman began to open fire. One bullet went through the security gate and hit Drake's front door. Another bullet struck and wounded a security guard who was also one of Drake's friends. While the car drove away, Drake and others in the house summoned help for the security guard and did everything possible to keep him alive. During the nearly 30 minutes it took for the ambulance to arrive, Drake and others labored to keep the man alive by applying pressure to the gunshot wound with towels. Blood was everywhere. And then it continues. It talks about, luckily, the security guard did survive. Okay. Then it continues. The very next day, May 8th, 2024, a different intruder used his bare hands to dig a hole under the security fence surrounding Drake's Toronto house. He managed to dig deep enough to squeeze through and enter Drake's property. Fortunately, Drake's home security guards caught him before he was able to cause any physical harm, although the trespasser managed to yell racist slurs, we're not sure what those are, and threats against Drake before being escorted off the property. On May 9th, 2024, the very next day, another break-in attempt happened. Now, this is what it culminates to. In the 2 decades leading up to May of 2024, although Drake was constantly in the public eye, nothing remotely like these events had ever happened to him or his family. But these events were not coincidental. They immediately followed and were proximately caused by, this is interesting, caused by UMG's actions leading up to and on May 4th, 2024. So what Drake is saying, in his entire career, he's never felt threatened, he's never felt unsafe. But what happened around Not Like Us, he believes because UMG added a lot of fire to the track. They're the ones who released it, distributed it. They essentially approved it because they would have to hit that button, right, to send it to the DSPs and things like that. UMG's hands are dirty. And anything that could have happened to Drake or his family are the direct fault of UMG. This is an interesting line. Even though UMG enriched itself and its shareholders by exploiting Drake's music for years, which he got paid for, and knew that the salacious allegations against Drake were false, UMG chose corporate greed over the safety and well-being of its artists. It's unfortunate if these acts of violence did happen to him. Luckily, no one was harmed. The security guard survived. It doesn't appear that Drake or his family was harmed. I can see where this would be sort of an emotionally and mentally jarring experience. But if you're looking for someone to be culpable, my question is, why are you going after the record label, basically the corporate entity that, by his own words, exploited his music for years, and not the person who actually created the music video that's cited here as being one of the catalysts for possible violence? That's the part of it that just feels very kind of misdirected, that we all know Drake wants to go after Kendrick, legally speaking, but he knows that A, it won't hold up in court, and in the public opinion, his reputation would be absolutely demolished. But they're basically dancing around that in this lawsuit. I'm going to link the full lawsuit in the description if you want to follow along. And if you are reading the PDF, Go to number 8 because this is a very interesting statement. This lawsuit is not as italicized, like just for emphasis. This lawsuit is not about the artist who created Not Like Us. It is instead entirely about UMG, the music company that decided to publish, promote, exploit, and monetize allegations that it understood were not only false, but dangerous. Drake is not a pedophile. They actually wrote that. Drake has never engaged in any acts that would require he be placed on neighborhood watch. Drake has never engaged in sexual relations with a minor. Drake has never been charged with or convicted of any criminal acts whatsoever. So the lawsuit continues, but just wow, right? Like when you see it in black and white, I'm just still shocked that Drake and his team would think that this lawsuit is a good idea. He's basically saying that a rap battle, a battle that he chose to jump into, like just let the record show, no one asked Drake to participate in this battle. After like that, he didn't have to respond. It was something that he wanted to do. And at the time, I gave him credit because he knew it was something the fans wanted. It was something that made hip hop exciting again to see two artists at the top of their game going back and forth on records. He decided to jump into the battle. Not only that, but he escalated the battle into a personal place. Kendrick's whole thing was like, let's just keep this friendly. We don't need to make this personal. Of course, he was doing that, kind of laying the trap, knowing that Drake can't leave it friendly. In the same way he had to mention Pusha T's wife when he was going back and forth with him, Drake has to mention Whitney. And not only mention her, but on tracks talk about allegations of physical abuse, talk about the fact that, Kendrick's kids may not be his, like all of these allegations that go after Kendrick's family and Kendrick's integrity. And I just find it really funny that it appears that Drake can throw punches, he can fire shots, but God forbid if he's on the receiving end, all of a sudden it turns into a lawsuit. And that's the part that to me is just comical. You chose to enter into a battle, you escalated it, and both of you went at each other. I mean, yes, Not Like Us is the bigger record, but if we go through both of their records, they're both essentially saying the other person is a scumbag. They're all misogynist. They're all abusive. I mean, it's kind of like Spider-Man pointing at the other Spider-Man. But if that's the case, should Kendrick now file his own defamation lawsuit? What if Kendrick comes and says, because of what you said, it really caused anguish in my family? Should Whitney file a defamation lawsuit against Drake? What about Dave Free? If he's like, I'm, just the manager, like, why are you now pulling me into this conversation? But that's just a part of rap battles. And anyone who claims to be a lover of hip hop, a student of hip hop, you would know that when it comes to battles, like the gloves are off. And some would say, people's families, their kids, they're off the record. You're not allowed to go there. But everybody goes there, right? Everyone goes after somebody's vulnerability, their weakness, what matters most to them. And that's been going on since the dawn of time. So the idea that just because Drake feels like his reputation was hurt, that his reputation was maligned, now this escalates into a legal battle. Nothing about that makes sense because I think, Pusha T could have filed a defamation suit. Meek Mill could have filed, like anyone can file then a defamation suit if we're going to take rap battles into court. And I know Drake's team keeps trying to say, no, it's not about that. It's about this big, scary corporate entity. And I want to get into that in a second. But they're trying to put the target on Universal Music Group because I believe they know in their heart of hearts, in the court of public opinion, Drake has already lost. And if you're going to go after Kendrick now again, it just makes it look like he's just digging his grave deeper and deeper. Now, it's so funny. Drake wants to make Universal Music Group into this big, scary, corrupt monster in this legal filing. And as I've said before on this channel, I am a firm advocate for artists, for creatives. I believe all creatives should be getting paid more, get better deals. I mean, that's like a whole other conversation about the music business and the way that it treats most artists. Here's the problem. Drake is at the top of the music business. And one of the reasons he's at the top is because he signed to Universal Music Group. Here's the thing. It can be the right message, this sort of like anti-corporate message and pro-artist message. But in this case, it's the wrong messenger. You are the most corporate rapper, Drake. Like, you know that. You've benefited greatly from this industry, from who you are, from how you present, from the hits that you've made. So all of a sudden, the same machine that made you, the same machine that has basically given you a career, is now not playing fair because for the first time in your career, you're feeling what a huge loss feels like. Let's go back to the lawsuit. So if you're following along, go down to 125. I know there's a lot of bullet points. And this here talks about, Kendrick is doing the Super Bowl halftime show. And this is what it says. On information and belief, UMG conferred financial benefits and leveraged existing business relationships to secure the headliner spot at the Super Bowl. In other words, UMG made sure that Kendrick was going to perform at the Super Bowl. Like, Drake, what are you talking about? First of all, Roc Nation, who has been producing the halftime show, has a great relationship with Kendrick and his team. Then on top of that, it's the Apple Music Super Bowl. Apple, and if you follow Apple Music sort of history on the corporate side, they've had great relationships with Interscope, which is Kendrick's label. They've been there for him since the start of his career. Kendrick doesn't need Universal to get the Super Bowl. If anything, the NFL probably came to him and his team, or maybe this was a conversation between Roc Nation and PG Lang. There's so many ways this could have played out, but the idea that Universal had to somehow like bend over backwards or, hard negotiate to get this. No, Kendrick is the biggest rapper in the world right now. He had the biggest song of the year. Wouldn't the Super Bowl want him? I mean, it just kind of makes sense. It's very aligned. But again, this shows where Drake isn't happy. Even if theoretically Universal's resources are leveraged for somebody else. If they're leveraged for him, totally fine. But if they're leveraged for other people, all of a sudden it's a problem. I think one of the most surprising things in this lawsuit is the lengths to which Drake is going to just find some sense of what's going on. So if you look at point 62, furthering, the recordings refrain that Drake is, quote, not like us. The recording alludes to Drake's Jewish heritage, saying that Drake is not a colleague, but a fucking colonizer. When did this become anti-Semitic? That's the part that I feel, even for Drake, it's like a really cheap shot. Like, that's not what Kendrick meant, first of all. And to go there, especially where we are in the world with sort of violence against the Jewish community, I don't know. I just find like this is a low even for Drake. I know this lawsuit is just low after low after low, but that might be one of the lowest lows, that all of a sudden Kendrick is anti-Semitic. And if that's what Drake got from the lyrics, I think he needs to spend more time on Rap Genius because he also doesn't understand apparently lyrical content. What's also kind of funny, and this is also why this will get thrown out specifically, the leadership at Universal Music Group are all Jewish. Like, Lucian Grainge is Jewish, and I believe Monty and Avery, who oversee Republic Records, Drake's label, are also Jewish. So if this song was so anti-Semitic, I'm pretty sure 3 powerful executives would not be disseminating it from their label. So things like that just ring really hollow. And I don't know, again, it's just a cheap shot. And I don't think Drake needed to go there, but he decided to go there. Now, this is where things get interesting. So after Drake files this lawsuit, of course, like social media is going crazy. Everyone is clowning him as expected. I didn't expect Universal Music Group would also join in on that. So they sent out a strongly worded response, and this is what they said. They called it illogical, to say the least. And they go, "We have not and do not engage in defamation against any individual. At the same time, we will vigorously defend this litigation to protect our people and our reputation, as well as any artist who might directly or indirectly become a frivolous litigation target for having done nothing more than write a song. So I know a lot of the Drake fans were trying to view this through the lens of, David versus Goliath, Drake going after the big company, trying to protect the little guy. And Universal's like, no, no, no. We see through this and we are going to stand because we know that if this lawsuit goes through, where does it end? You can go after any artist that you feel has, dissed you or said something against you. That First Amendment is really strong, and I think that's where proving defamation is going to be very difficult. The other part that's really funny, do you remember when Young Thug was on trial and there was this conversation about rap lyrics being used in court? Drake was one of the artists who came out and signed that petition, how putting rap lyrics on trial, is very it's anti-hip hop, it's racist, it should not be done, it's against the First Amendment. That's literally what he's doing now. And he can try to say that's not what it is, but it's literally what it is. I found that kind of funny. And then to me, this is like the coup de grace. Whoever the legal writers on the Universal side, mwah, chef's kiss on this, because these are some bars. So this is what they said in response as well. Throughout his career, Drake has intentionally and successfully used UMG to distribute his music and poetry to engage in conventionally outrageous back and forth rap battles to express his feelings about other artists. He now seeks to weaponize the legal process to silence an artist's creative expression and to seek damages. Ouch. So basically, Universal is saying, look, Drake, when you engage in rap battles, we never got involved. That's not our job. And you would have pulled out that First Amendment. This is my right as an artist. But the minute things didn't go your way, all of a sudden, we have to be involved in what's really a personal or professional issue between two guys. And, back in the day, it was not uncommon that, let's say, two artists on the same label are beefing, that, an A&R or an executive might have stepped in. But that was a different era. That was the era where executives just had closer relationships to artists. Oftentimes it was like a big brother or a father figure that could come in and sort of speak some sense into what was going on. Neither Drake or Kendrick relies on Universal in that way. They both have licensing deals, and their artist development at Cash Money and TD respectively, that happened years ago. At this stage in the game, they use Universal really just to distribute their music and as the bank for the advance that they got to sign their respective deals. So the idea that Lucian needs to have a sit down or a heart to heart with Kendrick, I would just ask Drake, would you be open to that same thing? If Lucian or Monty or Avery had pulled him aside and said, you know what, Drake, don't do this. Don't jump into this battle. It's bad for your image. You're going to possibly hurt your reputation. I cannot see Drake or anyone in OVO taking too kindly to that. So I'm not sure what they expected. Did they expect Universal just to refuse to put Kendrick's music out? We're not going to put it out. We're not going to send it out. You just do this. Our hands are tied here. I just am not sure what he really thought was going to happen. But I think so much of this goes back to ego. One thing I shared on Twitter was that for so many years, Drake was the golden boy at Universal Music Group. And we can even just say hip hop music as a whole. He has been successful for a very long time. And this is kind of an unprecedented streak because he went from the blog era, sort of that tail end of physical product, into the streaming era, and he was able to be successful. And I don't think anyone will take that away from him. The problem is when you've been successful for so long and also been kind of cocooned and protected for so long, the very idea that you have people who don't like you, whether it be on the industry side, on the label side or fans, I truly believe it doesn't register to him. Like in Drake's mind, Kendrick is not on his level. And how could this guy, a guy who commercially has not sold as much as Drake, a guy who, at least the optics are, he doesn't really play the industry games in the same way. He's not always out and about. He doesn't have pictures with every new rapper. How did this guy beat Drake so vigorously and also just so publicly? And I think that's the part of it that he's not able to understand. I'm going to do a whole video about what the ramifications of this lawsuit mean for hip hop specifically, because I think if this continues, it just sets such a dangerous precedent, not just from a First Amendment free speech place, but also just like the essence of hip hop. Are we at a place where competition is just dead? And if certain individuals don't automatically win, if they're not given certain privileges at all times, are they allowed to whine, blame everybody in the room? It just gets into a very slippery slope. And I just cannot see like hip hop as an art form flourishing under that kind of mentality. But I think that's going to be a separate video because already this video is getting pretty long. But what I'll say is, I think the whole thing is just very sad. In the beginning, so many of us did laud Drake for even joining the battle. And yes, although he was getting beaten round after round, there was still this idea that he can always come back with a hit. And what have I said when I go on the radio or television or podcasts? Drake, you are very rich. You're very successful. Just take some time off. Go on a sabbatical, maybe go do some philanthropic work, like go do a career pivot, focus on some other interests, or maybe just focus on yourself and your family. But instead, he's just incapable of that. He wants to keep releasing music and, listening to something like the Fighting Irish Freestyle. It's not particularly good or necessary, but he needs to be in the conversation. Like certain people we've seen in politics, or perhaps in tech or other facets of the world, he needs people to talk about him. The thing is, he also needs you to say nice things about him. It can't just be talking. It has to be positive. And that's where Drake has been doing, sessions with different streamers. He likes to be on social media. He wants you to talk about him. Meanwhile, I haven't heard a peep from Kendrick. Like in my mind, he's probably practicing for the Super Bowl, rehearsing somewhere, or just like sleeping in his like rap cave that's where he hibernates. But Drake can't not be outside. And right now, he just feels so defeated. He's just pointing the finger at everyone. It's Lucian's fault. It's Universal's fault. It's Spotify's fault. It's iHeart's fault. It's LeBron's fault. It's everyone's fault except Kendrick, because he can't say his name. That's still the boogeyman. But he's just sitting in a place where he's spiraling. And I just don't see how do you recover from this? And I know people will be in the comments or, trolling me. No, he's amazing. He's a GOAT. He's had this great career. I just wonder, at what point is it a bridge too far? And it reminds me of like a Ja Rule in 50. Ja was the commercial success superstar. 50 came in and basically, until that New York record, Ja was kind of on the outs. And one could argue he wasn't really able to recover. Not to say he can't release music or do projects, of course not. But when it comes to just the idea of being respected in hip hop, in the music business, as a man, as a boss, I just don't think after this lawsuit, like that can happen. And I'm sure people will come for me or they'll want to contradict me, but really think about it. If any other artist did this, how would you feel? Here's another thought. What if a female rapper did this? If she engaged in a rap battle, then proceeded to, file all these legal filings, suing everybody, blaming everyone, I just wonder what men would say. What would men in hip hop say? What would the fans say? What would the industry say? I have a feeling there would be a lot of men trying to school her on what hip hop is, explaining to her the pillars and the ethos of hip hop, I don't think people would be rallying around her. And I just want you to think about that as a fun thought exercise. If this were somebody else, how would you feel? Because in that case, then the rules don't apply the same for everyone. I mean, to me personally, I just can't respect it. You know, it's not something that I particularly admire as like a trait in a person. And I definitely don't admire that in rappers for sure. But it's also just, to me, it's not hip hop. And it feels like someone who just doesn't understand the rules of the game, the rules of warfare, the rules of battle, and just over and over, a record like Not Like Us, we shouldn't still be talking about. We will continue to talk about this until the end of time. And a big part of Not Like Us becoming this masterpiece is because of Drake. If Drake had just let it go, we would be talking about something else now. But instead, you know, we are in January 2025, and this song is not stopping. I listened to it yesterday. I'm sure a lot of you watched the video, re-listened to it, gave it some more streams. This song is now going into like the annals of history for all the wrong reasons, and that's because of Drake. So I'm sure from Kendrick, he is like, thank you, Drake, but you know, he really brought this on himself, and we'll just keep watching what happens with this lawsuit. But like I mentioned, I will do another video about what this lawsuit means for hip hop as a whole, because I do want to kind of go into sort of the history of battles and what the ramifications of this is, with Drake specifically deciding to take this move. But yeah, I have said a lot. So you know what? Now it's your time. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments, like, what you think this lawsuit, how it's going to end. How does it end for Drake? Is there any way that his reputation somehow recovers? Can you even listen to his music anymore? Like, that's another question. Is his music, I do not think is going to age well. But again, separate conversation. But I would love to know your thoughts following this new Drake legal filing. Let me know.